It's all in your head. You don't look sick. Your tests are normal. It's probably anxiety. There's nothing wrong with you. Have you heard these words from physicians, family, and friends? If you're someone who has been struggling and swirling through the revolving door of healthcare to find answers about your health, or if you know someone who is going through this experience, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast with Laura Nozicka, a show dedicated to exploring the challenges of living with undiagnosed or rare medical conditions. This podcast explores both sides of the bedside. We will be speaking with patients who have had challenges with finding a diagnosis, along with experts in the field. I'm your host, Laura Nozicka. Please note I am not a medical professional, nor am I affiliated with any healthcare, pharmaceutical, or device company. I am an entrepreneur, and I am an independent market researcher focused on helping healthcare organizations better understand the patient perspective. The podcast is not meant to offer medical advice, but to merely share the stories and perspectives of podcast guests. Hello, and welcome to the Desperate for Diagnosis podcast. I am Laura Nozicka, and happy to be back with my friend. I call you my friend, Dr. Gary Simonds. Thank you so much for being back with me, Gary. It's good to see you.
It's wonderful to be here, and it's wonderful to be considered a friend.
Well, thank you for being my friend. As always, we always have good offline conversations, so I'm happy to bring you back and bring you back to my listeners and get talking about some other things. Last time we talked about your book, Death's Pale Flags. We'll talk more about, but I just want to remind people on who you are and your brilliance and what you do. So let me just tell everyone about Dr. Gary Simonds, and he was the founding chief of neurosurgery and neurosurgery residency program director at the Carilion Clinic and the Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine until retiring from clinical neurosurgery in 2020. He remains a professor at the Virginia Tech School of Neuroscience and the Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine. He routinely presents and teaches at various national and international courses and meetings. He has written 3 books on burnout and building resilience, and has recently released his first novel, a medical psychological thriller, which I have read, entitled Death's Pale Flag. He loves to discuss a range of subjects, and this I know, which I'm so excited about, but anything from neuroscience, writing, healthcare delivery, critical conversations, leadership, science, and religion, ethics, school applications, leadership, and much, much more. And we have talked about much, much more, haven't we, Gary? We've talked about all kinds of things, from streaming services and book clubs and all kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm going to have to add a bunch of other topics to that list.
I think you should. I think you should. And even some non-healthcare topics there as well. So.
Absolutely. We all live lives, right?
Yeah, we do. So Dr. Gary, or Gary, we'll just say Gary because Gary.
Please.
Dr. Gary says it's okay to call him Gary. Yes. So we've talked about all kinds of things. And today, what I'm really excited about talking with you today about, Gary, and we've had lots of conversations about this, and certainly falls in line with my podcast title, Desperate for Diagnosis. And I'd like to bring forth the fact that doctors are really human. And we talk a lot in healthcare and even as patients, as human, there's this God complex with doctors and they're know-it-alls, and yet they never have the answers, or the answers that patients want to hear, or the right answers. Doctors don't know what they're doing. I think we hear the same things about doctors as we hear things about what doctors think of patients. So when patients say, "Oh, the doctor told me it was anxiety," or "It's all in my head," or "There's nothing wrong with you," there's things that I think are commonly said about physicians as well. And I'd really like to bring some humanization to doctors because you're people too, and with jobs like everyone else, maybe more out of the ordinary than most. You being a neurosurgeon has seen all kinds of things during your career, but because of the context of my podcast and some of the things that we've talked about and your reasons for retiring or walking away from the table, as you said, is that you did have your own desperate for a diagnosis moment that took you away from clinical practice. And now you're doing great things with teaching. And sometimes you get to play your music and your guitar and some of those other things. But I'd like to start off, Gary, if you can tell us about your diagnosis and what led up to that, and really what you thought of being a patient in the system, because we've talked about it.
Yeah, sure. It depends how many days you have to go into it, but
We can do the trilogy.
that could be a trilogy. I don't know. But thank you. No, I was thinking as you were talking though, there is definitely a psychology behind being a physician. And yes, believe it or not, physicians are human beings and definitely have their foibles and flaws. I will say in general, and through the years, I've known thousands of physicians and I'm on a med school admissions board and I work with pre-meds all the time. And I mean, they're generally very good people who have really busted their butts to get to where they are. Not that there aren't bad apples out there, but, for the most part, I think, the people really are trying, but they're still people. And, we all have flaws and we all make mistakes and all. That's just as a sidelight. But, there's a funny psychology. They talk about the med school syndrome where when you're in med school, you hear about all these diseases, one after another, after another, after another. And it's not uncommon for med students to kind of feel those diseases and wonder, oh my God, do I have leishmaniasis? Is there a worm in my brain? Is there this? Is there that?
I can identify with that, Gary, because as you know, I do market research for healthcare and I do research on all these different diseases and therapeutic areas. And yes, I think I probably even thought I had prostate cancer at one time.
Exactly.
Your brain just goes away with you and takes you to sometimes really bad places, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But it's interesting. I think there is a big shift that occurs then as you kind of wade your way through all this. And then every day, once you're out there and you're in the hospitals and you're in the ICUs and ERs, you're seeing all these very sick people or very injured people, one after another, after another, after another. And I think maybe even as a defense mechanism, one of the things that happens is you look at yourself and you go, well, but I'm healthy. I'm feeling good. I'm looking somewhat healthy and everybody else around me looks like hell. I think you start to get an inverse complex where you start thinking, I'm just above it all. I don't get sick. I mean, it's just the way it is. These diseases that everybody else are getting aren't ever going to affect me. So there may be a little bit of this kind of superhuman complex that starts to grow within, because I think just because you're so surrounded by the opposite, that it's a stark contrast. Anyway, that was just rambling through my head as we were talking there. So I was in that world where everybody else around me was sick, and I was doing everything I could to try to keep them from not being sick or to pull them out of the fire, if you will. And that's what neurosurgery is, a lot of trying to pull people out of the fire. Kind of a captain of industry, everything's going pretty well and patients are very thankful and grateful. And seems like we're rushing in all the time for this emergency or that emergency and feeling pretty on top of the world. And one day I woke up and had those kind of feelings that you get when you know a bad bug is coming, like a flu is coming. I don't know if you know what I mean, but the body feels a little prickly, maybe a little achy, you're feeling more tired, maybe a little scratch in your throat. And I'm like, oh God, here it comes. I'm going to get some bug and I got to work through it because like dopes, we never took time off for being sick.
There's no playing hooky, no calling in sick, right?
No, but it's one of the dumber things that we do in medicine. We get some sort of viral syndrome, and what do? We just keep going to work. And you think about that, going to work where all these vulnerable people are around. It is really a dumb work ethic. But
how could you not get sick at some point, right?
Right.
In a hospital, like they say, it's the worst place to try to get well.
Exactly.
Heard that?
Yeah. Oh no. I mean, it is. Hospitals are wonderful places if you're really, really sick, but you don't want to stay there long. You want to get out of there as quick as you can. But anyway, the long and short of it is, it just started feeling worse and worse. Except I didn't have the usual cough or sniffles. Just the whole body felt weird and tingly and achy and funky. And I even went to the ER, grabbed somebody there and said, hey, do a flu test on me. I think I'm coming down with flu. It'd be nice to know. And by the way, this also came to my mind when you were talking. There is a advantage to being a physician besides all the other wonderful things that we get for being a physician. There's a real advantage when you interface with the healthcare world, because I could walk in and grab one of the, dozens of ER docs that I interface with every day and just say, hey, you want to take a quick look, look over me and see if you think I've got the flu, and get a flu test and stuff. And I can do that instantly, right? Yeah.
And membership has its privileges, as they say, right?
Yeah, it does. But I think we underestimate this one, because for anything, for any disease, any consideration, any healthcare consideration for me and my family or friends, I have the, do not pass go card where I just, and on top of that, which is probably even more important, within a system, at least within my own system, I know who the long ball hitters are. I know who the people are who are the very best at their game. And so, very quickly I can grab the very best, and they'll drop everything because I'm one of the team, and, take care of whatever I'm asking them to take care of. What a huge advantage. And my wife and I, talked about this when we were applying for Medicare and saying, geez, I don't know how people who aren't involved in this world get through all this. It's ridiculously complicated enough. Anyway, sorry for the side concepts there.
No,
but
not at all. I think that offers great context in terms of the disadvantages that people do have in the healthcare system, particularly if you don't know how to navigate. How do you get care? How do you access the physicians that you need? And how do you advocate for yourself and push to get what you need? I think that's, certainly illuminates the fact that not everyone gets that, and not everyone is, from an equity standpoint, maybe isn't as healthy because they don't have that kind of access.
Yeah, 100%. The system can be very Byzantine, we again can short circuit it all. Just step in and go talk to somebody. And, my wife fell down the stairs at one point, ripped her shoulders to shreds.
Oh gosh.
And I just, I'm there in the pre-op area, and run into a superlative orthopedic hand surgeon who they also do the shoulder. And I said, hey, what should I do with my wife? They're like, oh, have her come see me tomorrow. And I mean, it's just a whole different world, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she would have had to go, primary care, and maybe they get sent to physical therapy because the insurance company denies them until they've had physical therapy. And I mean, it
Right.
goes on and on and on.
Wait 6 weeks for an appointment with a specialist, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And where we were, where I practiced for the last 18 years, in Roanoke, Virginia. Well, Roanoke's a little city and that's all well and good, but people came from 2.5 hours away, out in the middle of Appalachia to come see us. And so, if you say, oh, you need an MRI, it's not like they can then walk in and get an MRI. That has to get scheduled. So they have to drive home and drive back. And then they have to come back and see me, drive home, drive back. It just goes on and on. So yeah, it is not an easy world for the general public. And the more confusing it gets, it's very easy to see why people get frustrated. It's amazing how many patients would come to me and say, doc, I've been getting a runaround. And I'm thinking, you're not getting a runaround per se. You're just stuck in this vortex of modern healthcare where, one specialist may need another specialist, but it's not streamlined. So you bounce around for a while until you eventually get to us. So anyway,
And when you're a patient who's anxious to find out what's going on or at least have some progress to quell any anxieties that they might have about, well, why am I in pain, or why am I feeling this way? Why do I have problems with ears ringing like
right.
I do right now, and I can't get any answers? So I'm having my own desperate for diagnosis moment myself. But yeah, to be stuck and waiting just, I think, builds up so much more anxiety, and I think it makes what you're focusing on even worse. And I think it just paints a worse picture of the healthcare system, for better or for worse. Maybe it's the truth, but there's so many things that factor into pain and treatment and getting a diagnosis from a psychological standpoint versus just, trying to get in front of a doctor. Just the waiting is tough.
Yeah. And if you're in pain, for sure, if you're worried that is this cancer, well, you kind of want to know now, right? And you can definitely bounce around, and some places are more streamlined than others. But again, a tremendous advantage that we get that I don't think we necessarily recognize, but it's just there. And then when you see what other people have to go through, you just kind of go, oh my God, we got to do better than this. But it's, it's complicated. For example, I tried in our system to set up a mechanism where if we wanted an MRI or a CAT scan on a patient out of our clinic, we could get it right away. As a matter of fact, we had a new clinic building being built, and we wanted to put an MRI machine right in it so we could just roll them over. And really, it got shot down because of insurance. There's no way that we could get same day service from insurance. So it gets very complicated. We have a very complex healthcare system that often, shoots itself in the foot. Not because of negligence of people. It just goes on and on how complicated it is.
Yeah, like you said, it's a vortex for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that term because it does feel that way. And I still want to get to your journey with your diagnosis.
Oh yeah, that.
Wow. Yeah. But this is how we roll, right, Gary?
Right.
Our tangents. I love conversations with tangents so much. I love a good tangent, but it's true when patients think that doctors aren't doing anything for me, or I did get sent to physical therapy first, but maybe really surgery is the end all. But insurance dictates all of that, and that's really out of the doctor's hands, as are certain things with if they're employed with a healthcare system in a group, they're bound by all kinds of productivity metrics and things like that. And they're bonused based on those things. And not that patients care about that, but most patients don't understand that that's what doctors are working up against in a lot of instances.
Yeah, if you survey docs about their stressors, so we're very attuned with that in the burnout field. But if you survey docs about their stressors, way up there in the stressor list include, for example, just dealing with an electronic medical record. This came sweeping in, and in the end, it's much better for patients than the old-fashioned paper charts and all. But it was never designed for doctor ease. It was designed for bookkeeping and collecting of RV, meaning money, and that sort of thing, for the systems. And so doctors are always frustrated with it, and even more frustrated. They're frustrated that one EMR system doesn't necessarily communicate with another. So a poor patient will come in and you'll start asking them questions and they'll say, well, I answered these, when I was at the hospital in Atlanta. And you're like, I'm sorry, but we don't connect with them. There is no direct connection. I can't look that up. And they look at us like we have two heads and they're saying, how can that be?
But we still haven't figured that out, because I think that a universal EMR, that idea has been around for quite a few years now. And I still don't think it's.
No, it's all proprietary. They don't want it to communicate.
Right. Exactly.
And so and yet it makes ultimate sense. It's almost sinful that they don't communicate. Right. So it's crazy. Same thing goes with, you ask most docs, one of their biggest frustrations, it's dueling with the insurance companies, trying to get the insurance companies to okay this treatment or that treatment or this consult or that consult. And, I'm not trying to vilify the insurance companies. They have their jobs to do as well. And they need to protect the spending flanks for sure. And yet, from the doctor's end, you're kind of like, this patient needs it. Do I really have to go argue with somebody about this for the next half hour? And when you do call, you don't get the person that makes the final decision, and you go through all these phone trees. And I think, there's an element of figuring out that a certain percentage will just give up. And so anyway, those frustrations are definitely out there. And this is just everybody trying to do what they can within this crazy system that we have.
Yeah, lots of roadblocks, lots of frustration. I don't know. It hasn't really gotten any easier, I don't think. But so Gary, back to your desperate for a diagnosis moment. But did you say that you were feeling flu-like?
Yeah, so flu-like without the actual cough and sniffles, but it just felt like a flu was coming on, and there was no flu. It was getting worse and worse. And my family and I, we actually lived very simply, didn't do any fancy trips. Whenever we have vacation time, we go see the family. But for the first time, my family and I had planned this ski trip in Vermont, and we were going to drive up to Vermont, stay in a hotel and go skiing with the kids. And they were all in that teen or preteen era, and it was supposed to be real nice. Anyway, we get up that morning when we're supposed to go, and I go to my wife, I don't know, I'm feeling really rough. And my poor wife, who's put up with everything, forever, is like, get in that car. You can lie around, in the ski lodge if you don't want to ski, but we're doing this. So we get in the car and we're, an hour down Route 80 in Pennsylvania there. And I go, we got to turn back. Something is dreadfully wrong. So over the next few days, I started losing function very rapidly, where I wasn't thinking straight. I couldn't see straight. Like we talked, I play instruments like guitar and banjo. I couldn't make my fingers work on the guitar or banjo. I became unstable when I was trying to walk. It felt like my skin was on fire just everywhere. This kind of painful tingling everywhere. It was, really weird. The only comfortable place I felt, we had this little hot tub out bag, this little round hot tub, and I just spent time soaking in there because it was the only thing that kind of took this weird, painful feeling away. And so, of course, I'm in my business, and first thing I want to do is be superhuman. So I'm like, this will pass, whatever it is. It's a viral syndrome. I know viruses can, affect the nervous system, and I'm just getting a central representation of some stupid viral syndrome. Just sit in the hot tub, and my wife's looking at me going, you need to see the doctor. You need to see somebody. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. Well, she finally drags me into our primary care. So I always tried to go through, the process if I could. And we could see my primary care, and he sent off 1 million tests, came back positive for Lyme. But I grew up in New Jersey. Everybody in New Jersey has Lyme. But he went ahead and put me on doxycycline, and that upset my stomach, and it just spiraled over several days. And the funny thing about it, or I didn't even realize, kind of where I was, until I broke out in this rash all over because of the hot tub. We go and see a friend of mine who's a dermatologist. He walked in the room, and I still remember the expression on his face. And it was like shock. And he goes, Gary, what the hell's happened to you? It had nothing to do with the rash. He saw that I was like debilitated. And he calls the neurologist friend down, see how the system is working now. The neurologist friend takes a look at me and goes, Jesus, you're not looking so good, buddy. So for the next few days, I had lumbar punctures and MRIs and PET scans and all. And nothing was really showing up, although there was all these weird spots in my brain. And actually, to be honest with you, Laura, to go back to what we were saying before, one of the things that was playing in my head at the time was, am I just a nut? Am I a psycho? Is this all psychosomatic? Is it, is this psychological? Because nothing was, being obvious. And it was weird because seeing the spots in my brain was comforting to in a weird sense, because it was, something is going wrong. Something's going badly wrong, but, at least I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
So,
I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Too, where they're trudging along for who knows how many months or even years without any answers, but symptoms that can't be explained. And to get a definitive diagnosis, or at least one that makes sense, than having no diagnosis, is such a relief for them. No, they don't want to know they have some terrible disease, or maybe it's not terrible, but just missed, let's say, or misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, whatever. But to actually have a name for these symptoms, and to know that you're not crazy, which we, again, on our offline conversations, we've talked about kind of brain pain connection and what's real and what is it, and how stress and other psychological past traumas, etc., manifest physically, but you don't know until you do know. It's very stressful and making things even worse. But to get a name for symptoms really is a relief for so many. And here you're experiencing the same thing.
Yeah, of course. A couple of things about that. At that point, we still didn't even have a name. We just knew they were out of unidentified brain objects. We call them UBOs. But there was something going on. At least there was something, and so, because, I was working my butt off. I had no sleep every third or fourth night, usually every third in those days. And so you kind of thought, I could be just crazy. I could just be losing it,
At least it was something tangible for you.
And that's the thing. And then the other thing about it was, we short-circuited the system pretty quickly there. Within a few days, I'm there getting MRIs and PET scans and stuff. Mm-hmm. as opposed to that probably would have taken weeks unless it was done emergently, because it would have had to gone through this and that. And so, at least we were there. Well, I still continued to get worse, to the point where I really couldn't walk across a room without assistance. I really wasn't processing well at all. My wife tells me that I look just like my mother in end stage Alzheimer's.
Oh, goodness.
Where for her, it was terrifying. And I wrote in a piece about it. It's an odd thing, because even though that was my external presentation, I can remember my mind going the whole time. And we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know if I would die from this. And it was a funny thing, or a weird thing, whatever. I wasn't afraid of dying per se, even though it seemed very real, but it terrified me leaving my family alone, leaving my family behind.
Yeah.
But I can remember my brain being able to sort through that. And yet my wife tells me I wasn't connecting at all, wasn't making any sense, barely verbal, not able to walk, no coordination in my hands, losing weight rapidly.
So this is progressing in the course of how many weeks?
Days. I mean, it was going on in days. And so we it was a scary time. But again, so I'm kind of laid out by this thing, and the neurologist comes back at some point. I don't remember how long, but it took a little while, because these tests that they were running, some of them, back 30 years ago, took a little longer than they take nowadays. But he came back and said, I think we know what's going on. And said that a titer of a specific bug, a specific pathogen came back, something called mycoplasma pneumonia. And he said, probably what's gone on is you had a asymptomatic infection with this mycoplasma, and it's known to be associated with something called ADEM, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, which is, I guess the way to look at it is it's somewhat akin to multiple sclerosis, but it's not multiple sclerosis at all, where your own body attacks the insulation of your nerve cells. So what happens in multiple sclerosis is your own body attacks the insulation of a region of nerve cells in your brain or in your spinal cord, and those nerve cells stop working appropriately. And wherever the attack is going on, you get the symptoms. You get, difficulty with one arm or one leg or speaking or something like that. And, but it's in multiple sclerosis, it's usually one area that gets attacked, and then it gradually tries to repair itself. Well, in ADEM, it's just like the whole system gets attacked. So and that would explain, why everything was short circuiting. Nothing was working right. And he said, good news is if it doesn't get worse, it will eventually get better. Most times it eventually gets better. And, of course, I knew what ADEM was, and I've seen people die from it. But most times they do eventually turn around. And it took months, but gradually started getting better. And then
Gary, just a couple questions there. So,
yeah.
So all this was triggered by a virus then? Is that
a bacteria, yeah. And asymptomatic, I mean, I didn't even know I had it. But what happens is the body recognizes the bug, goes to attack the bug, but there's a cross reaction where it starts thinking that your insulation of your nerves has the same protein.
Autoimmune.
It is an autoimmune. It's an acute autoimmune disease. Yeah.
Okay.
So it goes on the attack and just starts attacking yourself.
Wow. So what was treatment for that?
Well, mostly time. I think at the time they did hit me with some steroids, and there's, you can throw immune globulins at it and stuff. But, the biggest thing is time. If it doesn't get to the point where you stop breathing and stuff, or go into coma, which I've certainly seen. But it started, it kind of planed out where it was and didn't get worse. And then eventually after weeks, it started improving. And, thankfully my wife's an occupational therapist. So, for the next many weeks, we started doing the occupational therapy. She had to kind of retrain me to walk, and I can remember hours and hours just trying to walk in the neighborhood and stuff like that. And then like an idiot, I was like, well, I got to get back to work, got to get back to work, got to get back to work. When can I go? Where can I go? Went back to work, not operating because I wasn't ready for that, but started seeing some patients, and within about 3 days had a relapse, was out for another many weeks.
Oh my goodness.
But then gradually got better and better, and eventually was able to go back to full-time, neurosurgery work with, I call them echoes, or, I guess being in my field, I think you're kind of finely attuned to how your own body's working, particularly your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And I could always tell, it wasn't a utter complete recovery. I would get some symptoms when I was really run down, but for the most part, pretty good. Things were pretty good. And I was able to go back to, everything. And then, went on to head a program and all that sort of stuff. But then in the last year or two of it, I started getting those echoes more commonly, particularly when I was tired and run down, which was all the time. So I started, and where it really hit, I was in the middle of operations a few times. I might start getting some double vision or feel like my hands aren't quite as nimble as they might be. And I said, geez, I can't do that. I mean, I can't put patients at risk, but, if I'm going to be like this. And that got all the wheels turning. Well, I could kind of not operate and hang around and be the boss, but nobody respects a surgeon who's not operating, at least in my world. And I started thinking, I pretty much 40 some years of marriage, ignored my poor wife and kids. Maybe I need to, be around more. And that's what got the wheels turning. Maybe it's time to just put it to rest.
So what do you process as a brilliant neurosurgeon in the hospital with all of your physician colleagues around you trying to come up with answers for these symptoms, and here you're the doctor, you're on the other side of the bedside, as I like to say. So when you look back and whatever you were able to process at the time, what are you thinking in that instance?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of thoughts that run through, some of which we've touched upon. And again, forgive me for taking forever talking about the disease, but it's kind of hard to do that one in 2 words or less, because it's kind of a long drawn out process. One of the things that struck me was when I was debilitated, how I was still processing inside, and that really hit me for all the people we care for in my business, for sure, in the neurological world, for sure, who may not seem to be connecting. And it got me wondering, geez, what the heck is going on inside, and wanting always to, treat them as if they are fully processing and communicating, and trying to treat them, try to explain to them what's going on, try to treat them with as much kindness and and empathy as possible, even though they may not look like they are there at all. And I think that was a big one. I think, again, recognizing how lucky I was to get into the system and at least get started on the whole thing and have some answers to a very terrifying situation, as rapidly as possible, and recognizing that that's not what everybody else gets. I always, as I said, for example, in my own system, and when I was the boss, I was always trying to come up with how do we make this quicker and easier for the patients so that, they get their information as quickly as possible. On a personal level, whenever I would see patients, thousands of patients over time, I would try to lay out everything as quickly as possible and as clearly as possible. So, just to try to shine some light into the darkness that they were facing and just lay out, here's what we know. Here is what we know right now. Here's what we're trying to do to figure it out. So hopefully there was, just more understanding of where they were and understanding what we didn't know. And I think it was really important to explain what we don't know, why we don't know it, be brave enough to say, I don't know right now what the heck's going on, but here's what we're going to try to do to figure it out. It's remarkable how often, particularly in the emergency room, and this, not casting aspersions about the emergency doctors, by the way, but when I'd be called in to see patients in the emergency room, which is all the time, I would always kind of say, hey, I'm Dr. Simonds. I'm here. I'm a neurosurgeon or a brain surgeon. And I would say, I'm here to make sure that this part of your nervous system is okay. And we've looked at the studies and you're okay. You're not going to need surgery. There are many other things that may have to be checked, but this part, I can tell you, we are in good shape. We don't need to do anything. Or, if it's not so good, explain it upfront and clearly right away. Anyway, it was remarkable how many patients told me, geez, doc, you're the first doctor who's actually spoken to me. And I know that's not true. I know many docs spoke to them. But, I think sometimes we get so lost in a lot of information that we've got to, process and get across that sometimes I think we forget to lay it out as cleanly and clearly as we can for the patient.
Yeah. My translation to that is you're the only doctor that spoke to them in a certain way where they felt understood or felt compassion or explained it in a way that they understood. As they say, we remember how people make us feel.
Exactly.
Versus what the actual words are. And if I had to guess, that's probably what they were referring to.
Yeah. And, again, we've talked about it before, but we slip so easy into medicalese too. So we may even think we're explaining everything, but if we get into medical jargon, we'll lose 99% of the people. And yet, it's so easy to do because that's how we speak to each other. When I talk to the ER doc, I'm in complete medical jargon. And then you step it right from there, 2 feet away, and you step into the room and you got to go through a complete translation of what you were saying. So, it's very understandable. Everybody is in a rush. But I think it underscores how important it is to kind of stop, think about their situation, their fears. And I guess that was one of the things I was always going after is what is this patient afraid of right now? What is their worst fear? How can I allay that at least? And then move on to, what we do and what we don't know.
Yeah. What made your experience as a patient different when it came to interacting with patients after all of that, after being a patient? How did it change your approach?
Yeah, I would like to say it made me a much more empathetic and highly compassionate doctor. I'm not sure I can say that.
Which it sounds like you already were those. So I don't know, Gary, if you could top that, but I guess maybe what perspective did it put on the patient experience aside from maybe what you assumed or thought you knew before?
Yeah, I think I was somewhat again, my specialty is so nasty, is so filled with tragedy, is so filled with awful news that, I was already deeply immersed in that world. And I think I got it that, people are suffering. We need to work on their suffering. We need to, address them more than just on the neurosurgical level. We had to address them as human beings. If anything, that my own experience underscored, I think, is how much it sucks, to be laid out and dependent on everybody else.
And strangers, no less.
Yeah, well, except for me, I didn't have the strangers, so
Right.
for me, I'm in a familiar setting. Everything they tell me, I know. I mean, I can process it. And so for me, I'm getting the Disney World version of it, right? Oh, isn't modern American medicine wonderful because everything works. Everybody's doing everything they can to help me. And I think it helped, though, also to understand the physician side of it was when a neurologist that I deeply trust says to me, "We don't know what this is yet, but here's what we're tracking down." I'm not sitting there going, "Oh, are you trying to hide something from me? Are you giving me the runaround?" I can fully trust them because I already do trust them, and so that made it easy. But I'll tell you, it absolutely made it clear how much it sucks. That's the best way I can explain it. It is an awful situation to be that dependent, that threatened, have this whole world that you exist in threatened by, something microscopic, and you don't know where it's going to end. So, yeah, I mean, I think I already had my share of empathy, but I mean, how could it not be underscored when you've kind of been through what they've been through and lucked out? I mean, I guess that's the other thing. I came out of it just going, good God, am I lucky? I mean, talk about dodging a bullet because, I mean, people go through that sort of thing and don't come out of it. They die or they're left permanently disabled. And here I'm complaining about some double vision now and then or whatever. And so I think, yeah, I mean, a appreciation for how freaking lucky I am and how much I would wish that for anybody that, we can get you through it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's all perspective, right? It's all relative. I always say we all get our own little slice of hell. Is what I say. And my pain or your pain or anyone else's pain, that's your pain. And it's all relative to you and how you're experiencing it, for better or for worse. Is it worse than someone else's? Maybe not, but it's yours. And I think that it's difficult sometimes for clinicians, as we know, pain is so subjective, or what you're feeling is subjective, but it's your feelings. And to have those patients who are in a different situation, different from yours, having the support of colleagues that you knew, so often contend with, I don't think the doctor understands me, and what I'm saying is I'm feeling dismissed or feeling misunderstood, or I am feeling like I'm being passed along. So it's certainly a different perspective that you had for sure, having those colleagues around you. But Gary, what were you said there were spots on your brain. What were those?
Those would be, areas where it became obvious where on a microscopic level, everywhere through the brain and spinal cord was losing this insulation. We call it myelin. It's living tissue that's laid down around the nerves, and it helps their conduction. But it's akin to the insulation we have on our wires. And, if you eat away at the insulation of the wiring of your car, like if a rat does it, or a mice, I don't know. I guess it's mice and stuff get into the car wiring sometimes. If two uninsulated wires touch each other, they cross. And anyway, something similar can go on. And the spots were just areas where there was enough damage that it became macroscopic rather than microscopic. And so you're looking at your own brain going, oh my God, it's getting beaten up. But, to go back to what you said, I think is really important. And it fit into this scenario too. And that was, we have a tendency, and I see this on so many levels in society, but we have a tendency to think that suffering, human suffering, can be put onto a scale. And I mean, it's a certain level. I guess it can. If your arm is ripped off, it's different from getting a mosquito bite, right?
Right.
But I think we have a tendency to want to always put it on a scale and think that we can therefore kind of judge people's responses as, is that a valid response or is that an invalid response?
Mm.
Oh, so you're I don't know, well, I'm going to date myself. I was going to say your TV guide didn't come this week. What a tragedy. But that is dating myself. But some simple thing and somebody's all put out about it. And you're like, really? That's what you're worrying about? And other people face huge things. For a good example, it would be hard sometimes for us. We would go in a neurosurgery world. We go from one patient's room where we had just explained to the family and the patient that they have, a malignant brain tumor, that it's going to take their life. We're going to throw everything we have at it, but they need to get their affairs in order, because at some point it will take their life in the next year or two. And, you can go from that explanation and you go into the next room where somebody has, a mild back problem and they're acting, a common expression in the medical world is they're acting like a dying queen, they're on the bed. Oh, the agony. And you can see that and go, oh my God, the difference in degree of seriousness here is massive.
Hmm.
Stop being a dying queen. Stop being so dramatic. But the reality is that person's suffering is that person's suffering.
Right.
And if they're perceiving this as being dreadful, who are we to make a judgment on it? So, I think we got to get off that scale. And even, like when I was in the throes of the early disease here, my body was on fire. I don't think most physicians understand or know what I'm talking about. And probably as I would discuss it, probably would be going, God, Simonds has gone into a bit up the deep end. This is crazy. Your whole body isn't, on fire and crawling. And well, it sure as hell felt that way. And it was a miserable, experience. So I think, another lesson is that we have to take people's suffering at face value. We're not here to make a judgment. If for some reason it comes down to whether they get workman's comp or not, that's not my business. Somebody else has to do that. That's from another organization, another group of people to figure out. We as physicians, we as caregivers, I think have to give everybody's suffering its own due and not put it on a scale, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So with your experience, is there anything that could tell patients as far as navigating the system or how to get into care quicker? Any advice that you could offer?
First one is,
don't get sick, right? First one, don't get sick.
Get a family member into the medical system, I guess. No, I think number one is some patients recognizing that for the most part, people are really trying to do their best and trying to navigate the system. But number two, the corollary to that would be, be an advocate for yourself or your family member. Don't take the BS. Mm-hmm. And if you are in a lot of pain or you're in a lot of anxiety about your situation, I think you have the right to call foul and say, no, 3 months is not appropriate. 3 months is too long for me to wait to see this specialist or that specialist. Most systems, for example, have patient advocates, patient advocate offices where, if it truly feels unreasonable, I think you have the right to advocate for yourself. It goes better. I can just tell people, from watching this unfold from the other side of the fence, it always goes better if you can be reasonable, if you can try to hold your temper, try to hold the righteous indignation and just reason it out with the system that you're engaging with. But you also have a right to, expect decent, timely care. So I don't think you need to just take everything that is dished at you. But, when the anger comes out and people start yelling, what happens is everybody goes into a defensive mode rather than a helpful mode. Mm-hmm. But I think even down to calling foul on the insurance companies and saying, listen, who do I talk to make sure that this is dealt with in a timely fashion is absolutely reasonable. And I think a lot of patients just accept what kind of gets thrown at them. Also, I think, using your doctors as an ally, patients sometimes would say to me, I'd say, oh, geez, it sure sounds like you need to see this sort of doctor or that sort of doctor. And they would say to me something like, I've been trying for months to get in to see, such and such, and I just can't. Well, I could then pick up the phone and just say, hey, I got a patient here who I really think needs to get seen. Any way you could squeeze him in. And sure enough, within a day or two, that appointment would pop up. So I think you can use your physicians as allies as well, as opposed to as, this monolithic block. I think, again, most physicians really want to do you as well, but you've got to let them know, just to be kind of a silent accepting, all right, the system's running me around. And I think that's dangerous too.
Yeah. Gary, I want to stop for just a second. Gary, thanks for all of those tips. And I think it's so important for people to understand that they can feel empowered. I think that's maybe a cliche word, but at the same time, certainly very descriptive of what families and patients can be doing for themselves, that they're not just kind of left alone in the dust to try to navigate a system that a lot of times seems like is working against you. So thank you so much for all those tips on how patients might feel, again, more empowered to get through their health journey and get some answers. But I'm curious, as you went through all of that and you got to the point of thinking through retirement, what ultimately put you over the threshold to make the decision?
Yeah, I think a few things. The more morbid side of it is, being in the neurosciences, I realized that you have a set number of neurons, around 80 billion. But you have a set number of neurons. I am sure I laid waste too many through the disease. So, somewhat my recovery is a testament somewhat to neuroplasticity because I certainly must have lost a lot of neurons. The nice thing about the disease is a bunch of neurons that are damaged aren't necessarily going to die. So the ones that are damaged are able to kind of come back, but you certainly lose them. You lose them every day just by being alive, and I'm not young anymore. So I started thinking about, particularly with more symptoms coming on, I started thinking about, well, there's no way to predict where I'm going to be in 10 years. In terms of neurological function, maybe I'll reach a point where I'm not, as with it, who knows? And so that's what really got the gears starting is, do I want to kind of stay here in the fight, if you will? Recognizing that I probably shouldn't be operating, at some point at least. I think, I went through all sorts of considerations of, well, I can just, stop taking call and maybe I won't be so tired. And then I started thinking about, well, if you're not taking call, then you don't really know what's going on. I always felt like you could really tell what was going on in the system when you're there in the trenches in the middle of the night better than any other time. So anyway, all these considerations were flipping through my mind about that, or do I, just kind of gracefully bow out? You kind of leaving on top. Nobody's going to be. I don't think my residents were at the point yet of making fun of me for my incompetence or anything. So I thought, well, there's a million other things I want to do in life. And as I said, I neglected my wife and family for 40 years. And I didn't want to also kind of there's a lot of surgeons who keep operating until they're basically, just a little ways off from dying. And I didn't want to, put down the scalpel and collapse into a wheelchair and turn to my family and say, okay, now you can take care of me. I thought that was unfair too. So anyway, all these things were going through my head. As like I said, there's a billion other things I wanted to do in life. I wanted to write, and get to my instruments and hiking and, all that fun stuff. As we talked about, before, lead a lush life, not necessarily, at the bottom of an alcohol bottle, but, lead a really happy, fun life. And so it also helped that we had a granddaughter that was born. So, so anyway, that calculating it all out, I said, we've never lived on the expensive side. Can we afford pulling the ripcord early? And I said, sure. And so we did.
Yeah. You said that you talk with physicians about retirement. What tends to be the hardest part of walking away from a physician career?
Yeah, that opens up a whole nother can of worms there, Laura.
A whole nother episode.
I
think we've got like at least 4 to 5 more episodes in the future, Gary, which is awesome. But yeah, what do you think?
Well, I think it's a real important topic, actually, at least for the physicians out there and everybody in healthcare. We tend to just talk about physicians, but PAs and therapists and nurses,
Sure.
We're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
But I think there's a few things. Just as one interesting observation, I was we call it a case hound. I probably did twice as many operations as average. Is not just probably. I know the average output of neurosurgeons, and I was doing 2 to 2.5 times the normal volume. I think I was good. I was fast. I had good results. And I enjoyed the heck out of it. So what my biggest fear was, oh my God, if, you stop doing that, are you going to feel miserable? And the weirdest thing is I haven't missed it one bit.
Oh.
And so when I tried to auto-analyze it, I think my conclusion has been that what I didn't realize when I was doing all these things is that every single operation you do, probably every patient interaction, but particularly every operation you do, even if it feels like the simplest operation on earth, it carries a certain amount of stress. You as the surgeon, and I think it's important for your audience to understand, you as the surgeon never go to work and go, I think I'll give it, I'll give a half-assed attempt today. No, you go and going, I want to do the very best I can possibly do. And we tend to put ourselves on a perfection track. I want the operation to go this way, and that's the way it's got to go. And the minute it starts wandering, which they all do to a certain degree, because it's human bodies and all that sort of stuff, just a little bit of bleeding is annoying, so the minute you start straying off that perfect path, the stress level goes up. And I don't think I recognized just how much that was pervasive in the job. And then when I wasn't doing, I'm just kind of like, where's all that kind of inherent tightness, that inherent angst that seemed to be there, even though I think I loved it. I think I loved doing it, the feeling of, kind of constant growth and accomplishment and all that sort of thing. So that was the weirdest part. I think the challenge for so many docs is it's a field for many of total immersion. And it starts, I think it starts as early now as high school, where you got to get a 4.8 in high school to get into your good college so you can get perfect grades and perfect MCATs and get into med school and grind your way through med school, and then grind your way through 7 years of residency, and then grind your way through your career. Well, it doesn't leave a lot of time for the development of personhood. And I think what a lot of docs tend to do is invest a lot of their being in being a doctor, a lot of their psyche, a lot of their persona in being a doctor. Well, if you stop being a doctor, and my own little rat of a granddaughter did this to me just recently. We were talking about something about the brain, and she's 8. She was skeptical about what I was telling her, mostly because I goof on her all the time, but she was skeptical. And I said, I am a neurosurgeon. And she goes, you were a nurse.
Oh, so, she's a little sassafras, isn't she?
So anyway, but, I think so many people are invested in and only invested in being a doctor, that becomes a real threat. And probably, at a certain age, we all should get out. But a lot hang on because they don't have anything else to do. I'm a closet rock star. I'm a closet.
I just found this out.
I'm
started chatting. So lots of silver linings for you.
Yeah, closet, closet soccer star and all this sort of stuff. So, I needed some opportunity to get out and find my other selves.
I love this multi-passionate retirement that you have here, multi-passion retirement. I think that's so cool. I always say I'll be excellent at retirement because I have lots of things I want to do.
Yeah.
Trying to do them in the meantime, but that darn job gets in the way, as you know. So one of my sons, actually the one who has the granddaughter, he's a physical therapist, and he runs his own shop down here in Asheville, but he has a lot of retirees, and he notices, he says, oh my gosh, all you retirees are the same. You're saying you're so busy, you don't have time for anything. Yeah.
And I think he's right.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. Boy, if your son's a physical therapist, your wife is an occupational therapist, I can only imagine the holiday dinner.
Well, there's a lot of aches and pains that get sent around, Hey, did you do something about this shoulder?
That's so awesome. But one of those passions is your book, Gary, Death Scale Flag. How we're going with the book. What's new there?
Well, you were asking if I had more time to talk, and I think I have the Pulitzer Prize committee on the other line right now. So
By all means, Simonds. Well, they'll let me hold you up.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that I'm going to beat out Stephen King yet, but maybe another few weeks before I clear his sales. No, I mean it's going okay. I would love to see. I don't. It's easy to say, but it's not like I'm going to make millions off the book. It's not like I'm looking at it as a major source of income or any source of income, but there are a lot of parts to it that I was hoping people would read and want to discuss with me like you do. Like, the discussions you and I have, I think are always so freewheeling and all over the place. But I think they're fascinating, right? And that was one of the reasons to write the book. I was hoping people would look at it and say, geez, I never thought of that. I'd love to discuss that further. And I get some of that, but I would love more of it. I mean, I on the website, I have all the ways to contact me and they're truly legitimate. I'm not blowing smoke. And I think it does us all good, as a people, as a society, to kind of tackle subjects together. I think we kind of get very insulated. So, you have something like you have, Laura, with a lovely and wonderful podcast. And hopefully people are listening and letting it turn their wheels and getting them interested in, multiple subject lines and multiple considerations, because we all need each other. We all need to figure out how to work all this stuff together. The more isolated we get, the more trouble we get into. So I think your efforts are stellar and really important, and I'd like to just be kind of a part of that universe where we're prodding people. Hey, it's fun to discuss this stuff. It's fun to broaden our horizons, think outside the box, come up with different solutions. So I think we're in the same game now, Laura. Yours is definitely more successful and more direct, but I think
I'm not so sure about that, Gary. But thank you. It's all an illusion. So,
well, no, it's such a great service. And I'll tell you, at least in my microcosm, LinkedIn, sends me these notifications and so many people have looked at this post or that post. And your one, that you did with me was way up there. It just kept coming up as the top post of the week.
Fantastic.
So some people are listening. I know that.
That's for good. Sure. Anybody out there? Hello, is this thing on? Yeah, I always wonder. Gary, I cannot thank you enough. God, I do. I so enjoy our conversations and looking forward to more, and so appreciate you talking about your story and again, like I said, really humanizing physicians. So doctors, certainly are not immortal, as we've highlighted here. And just like anybody, you have to live for today and do things that make you happy. And you certainly figured out how to do that with all of the cool things you're doing, plus your book. And please, everyone out there, pick up Gary's book, Death's Pale Flag, certainly available on Amazon. And where else, Gary, is your book available?
Basically all the online stores for sure, booksellers for sure.
Cool. All right, Gary. Well, thank you again. And everyone, you will be seeing and hearing Gary again at some point. We've got all kinds of things that we still want to talk about and bring out to the world. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This is Laura, your host of the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. Stay well and keep pushing for answers. We'll see you soon. Oh my goodness, that's a wrap on another compelling story. Thanks for listening to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. If you would like more information about today's guests or to find out more about Laura, me, go to desperateforadiagnosis.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow show updates and healthcare news on the podcast's Facebook page. If you would like to be a guest on the show, or if you have any questions, advice, or suggestions for our guests, please email me at lauramarie@desperateforadiagnosis.com.